Hey, I'm Bill Gross. Welcome to my weekly real estate market update. This week, we're going to focus on the lawsuit, the NAR lawsuit, the settlement, the effects of it. I think it's really based on a fraud that the plaintiff really misled their actual experience. And we're going to go into that based on what's happened since. I believe this was somehow, he wants you to believe he was misled by a conspiracy of local realtors, international brokerages, the Association of Realtors, the multiple listing service, and this poor husband and wife were confused by all the paperwork and all the processes. Since it's football season, I'm going to throw my penalty flag and say, no, that's not really the case, and what's happened since has proven that. But before we go into that, let's first take a look at the market, and then what we'll do is go right into that story, and I'll cover the other news stories later. We're going to change our format a little bit this week. But to get set of where the market is right now, in any economy, you have two parts. You have the demand and supply. Demand is in real estate mostly affected by interest rates, and the supply is by the amount of houses for sale or the inventory. Let's take a look at demand side. Mortgage rates stayed down, closed at 6.37%, as you can see, amongst the lowest in the last year and a half. So easily, interest rates continue to be in a range that should continue to drive more interest in the home buying market, at least strong enough given all other factors that we have. On the inventory side, if you look closely, you'll see that the inventory is declining. We're at 602,000 units for sale as of right now. Now, last year, that number was 522,000. So we have more by about 20%, not quite. And then the year before that, we had 566,000. Now, you'll notice last year's inventory rose up. This year's inventory is climbing down. And so we're about the same range. And these years are all lower than any year before the pandemic. 2019 and before, we had 800,000, 900,000, or a million houses for sale. So we clearly have very low inventory. And the reason why I always focus on that, it's important that as long as you don't have a lot of houses for sale, you can, as long as you have more houses for sale than buyers, prices can't go down. So we can't have a drop in rates of any significance as long as those market conditions apply. Here in LA, I like to look at the Altos Research Report for local report. They have a market holding at 38. Now that's down from 42 last year, and 40 and 1 and 40, 39 a couple weeks ago, down to 38. That's the overall number. You just take a look overall and you'll see the market is fairly stable. Interest rates dropped a bit. That gave a little boost to demand side. A little more inventory here in Los Angeles. That's why we're at 38 rather than 42. We're still, if you look at the chart, a slight seller's market, but not the hard seller's market we were before. So overall, the market, at least in Southern California and the LA in general, is stable and fairly normal. Now, let's get into the commission story. So again, the plaintiff in this story, a Josh, let me get his name right, Sitzer. The whole story that started the complete disruption of real estate was that somehow he was confused. He and his wife were selling a house. Part of the listing was agreeing to pay a commission to the buyer's agent as part of the process to sell the property. Now, when we talk to sellers, sometimes we have them pay for photos or video or other services, clean out services, staging services. And most commonly, we've always had for years, for 100 years, cooperation with agents and agreed upon a split of the commission that the agent would give to the other agent to represent buyers to bring them in. And that's gone on for most of 100 years. Now, in this case, Josh Stitzer claims that he didn't realize that. Not during the escrow. He claims he was, and use his words, he was bullied and coerced, at least quoted by TechCrunch, into the contract. And then after he closed, he happens to talk to his friend, who happens to be one of the nation's largest class action attorneys. And voila, they end up suing for billions of dollars and winning, and stand to make tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars because he was this poor victim of this situation. Now, I again, threw my penalty flag on that. I don't think there's any chance that the guy is a victim. Let's take a look, though. Since that time now, Josh is taking his winnings, and he's now forming a new real estate company. He's replaced realtors with a flat fee. And in his mind, of course, he's never sold a house but once, apparently, and was surprised. So he's so incompetent as a seller that he was coerced and bullied and made a mistake big enough to disrupt the industry. But now he's going to design a company to reshape the industry with flat fees. It may be news to Josh, but I've been in real estate for 38 years. There have been flat fee companies around the entire time. And certainly there are customers who prefer to pay a limited fee, maybe They're more knowledgeable. Maybe it's a simple transaction. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways real estate is done. And to me, a flat fee is an option. And there's also what I would call a la carte pricing. In his case, Josh, the new real estate genius, is going to charge per showing $50. There's companies that do that now. And then a consult fee before you write an offer of $199. Interesting. Why would somebody be your consultant if they're not going to represent you on the purchase? But whatever. And then a flat fee option. But the flat fee only covers 5 showings and 2 offers. The average buyer in today's market sees 10 houses and writes 4 or 5 offers, 4.5 on average. So really their standard package doesn't even cover an average experience. And I think this gets to the heart of it is geniuses like Josh don't understand how hard the average realtor works, particularly on the buyer side. I don't normally, as a general rule, represent buyers who are buying first time or and often represent buyers on buying homes because it is a lot of work for the limited pay. I work more with the seller side. So Josh, like most business people, thinks he's a genius, but he's picking the wrong side of the market to get into. So again, if you read TechCrunch, he talked about him now raising money. He's going to disrupt the industry. Good luck, Josh. World perceives, but it's a tough business, a lot tougher. But again, he portrayed himself as being misled and bullied. This is a guy, here's his resume on his website. He's a chief business officer for Unanimous AI. 20 years experience in consumer insights, digital marketing, and business development technology firms, both large and small, BA, MBA from Cornell. And he sold mobile advertising to Fortune 500 companies. Yet he wants you to believe he never read his listing contract, never read the estimated seller proceeds. But despite that, he's a genius now, and he's going to disrupt the whole industry with his new flat fee program that somehow can help sellers, I guess, save money by using him rather than somebody else. Personally, as long as he's using his money from his ill-gotten gains or he's using other tech companies' monies, I don't have a problem with it. But the problem is, this is a continued trend now where we have these investors who seek to disrupt the business. And when doing so, they're disrupting people who are in the business, who pay taxes, who support our communities. And they're favoring companies who typically aren't. They're located in one location. They're Zillow in Seattle, or they're some company out of state. They don't support local industry, local communities. They're not the church members. They're not the people who help you locally and join Little Leagues and such. But more importantly, they don't pay taxes. In a case like this, Josh's new company isn't going to pay taxes unless and until ever they make money. All their investment is basically upfront, and they may operate for 5 or 10 years, or like Zillow forever, and never pay taxes. So again, I don't buy this guy being coerced. I don't buy him being bullied. The opposite. This is now, he's attempting to use his money to bully industries. And so let's take a look, though. What's the result? Here, Josh's settlement as a result of this commission now is coming through the pipe. And what is it really doing to the marketplace? Is it making, as a result of the lawsuit, are buyers and sellers getting better service? Well, of course, no. Here's an example. We have a report that finds that buyer agency agreements are incomprehensible just because they want to avoid being sued. And this comes from a story written by Tanya Monastery. Actually, it's a research report. She's a contracts law professor. Now imagine that. You have a contracts law professor now looking at these buyer agreements. She says they're incomprehensible. At the end, she says, the new forms are all complicated and will not be understood by average buyers and sellers. Now remember, again, in my way of looking at it, and there's a copy of her report, it's linked in my report in my email. Here's a copy of the report, but in my way of looking at it, the seller in this case was very sophisticated. This is a guy who's starting his own tech company who claims to have sold mobile advertising to Fortune 500 companies. Very sophisticated, and he didn't understand the forms. How is the average consumer going to? And the answer is, based at least by a report by a contracts law professor at the University of Buffalo, not likely to happen. So what's going to happen? Well, what's been happening overall in all of American industry is your consolidation of these big Goliath monopolies destroying individual companies. Look around, I don't know your neighborhood, but there's no more small retailers selling clothes. There's very few small retailers, food, restaurants are almost more and more connected to chains and regional chains and franchises and such. Auto repair places increasingly are, the certain muffler shop or the certain oil change shop or the certain tire shop, less and less independence. Gas stations used to be independent. Now they're almost all part of big oil companies. The consolidation of big companies. Now there is some efficiency. Take a look though, and this will give you an example in real estate what's going on. Operating cash flows. This was done by a real estate professor, Mike Del Pret, who is out of University of Colorado. And he shows how all the real estate companies are either losing money or making very little compared to Zillow. One exception is eXp Realty, the company I'm affiliated with. If you take them out of the picture, every other company together has less operating cash flow than Zillow, who pays no taxes. Now, all the realtors in these companies pay taxes, but Zillow doesn't pay taxes. But they're being put out of business. Anywhere, which included Century 21 and Coldwell Banker agents. Open Door got destroyed. Redfin is struggling to stay alive. Remax is struggling to stay alive. Real, and then Compass is, doing better than on the rest, not as well as EXP. But what happens is Zillow is bringing in so much money, it's destroying competitors. It's using its monopolistic power to destroy competition, not help competition. And what I found fascinating was Mike did this research, and it actually was true on an international level. If you go a little further down on his, let me bring it back up. He added in the Zillows of Germany, the UK, Scout24 is Germany's, Rightmove is the UK, and it shows REA. You notice that they all have operating cash flows similar or actually larger than Zillow's. Probably because Zillow still has competition they've destroyed yet, as they're trying to use their monopoly power to destroy us. But what's happening is real estate is moving to these large monopolistic corporate entities. And the question is that good? Is it driving up housing affordability? No, not in America. Is it driving down commissions? Not on its own. Commissions are competitive without Zillow's effect of them. So we have this effect going on where business is being pushed more and more to these large, corporate entities. Also interesting, Mike reported recently on how unhappy consumers are with the response time. They say over 47% of online requests for information don't get replied to. And the reason why is the online leads are the leads that Zillow is trying to sell. They're not worth much. As a real estate agent, I would never reply to an online lead. I refer them to hungry, brand new agents. In some cases, because they like me when I do it, but to be honest, it's not worth my time. Because people will frivolously shop for property, but when they're referred by a friend, when they're connected to me personally, they're going to be more reasonable and more responsible, and it's safer for me to work with. Obviously, young women don't want to be going out and showing property to strangers who reply to them online. And so what's happening now is you have consumers getting worse service. You have the Zillow's trying to force the leads that they don't want to work with to companies. They're basically going out of business. And you have to ask yourself, at what point does this stop? Well, I don't know. One thing is also happening at the same time is these same companies who are selling leads are being sued because the leads are fake. And there's a recent lawsuit here. If you take a look at Move Inc., OpCity, REA Group, Realtor.com, all participants in a lawsuit because the leads that they were selling to real estate agents are claimed to be fake. So you have, you can sell fake ads online, and we know this happens in other online services that we do business with. You know that goes on. And so an online service can make money selling fake ads. Zillow has always made more money selling ads of properties that would never be bought than they did for properties that were really competitive. And not to leave Zillow in the picture, but here's an example. One of my readers, shout out to Shiva, sent me. He showed me an example of where this ad for State Farm, who's not selling insurance anymore in Calabasas, is on the Zillow website. So State Farm is buying an ad to be shown on the Zillow website in an area where they're not really selling insurance. So is that a fake ad? Well, either State Farm is misleading customers or Zillow is charging State Farm to put their ads in places where they don't want to write insurance. But either way we look at it, it sounds great to have all this technology, and it is. It's very powerful, and I use technology in my business every day. But at the same time, it becomes impersonal, and then the pain and the mistakes end up being pushed down and overlooked. And so to wrap up the story, let's go back now. It all ties together. One seller, husband, wife, very sophisticated by any way you look at him, very experienced in business overall, went to one court with one judge, one jury of 12 people. And they sued and disrupted the entire residential real estate industry. And the result is now forms that are incomprehensible according to a contracts law professor. They're more confusing, beyond the ability of the average buyer, pushing the industry further from personal service into more of a corporate online tech service, and competing with now national and global services, which at least in America today, Zillow, not paying any taxes. How is this sustainable? How can you destroy an industry that's been the backbone of our country and the source of the American dream for so long and end up with an industry that is just so disrupted and destroyed? It's just, to me, it doesn't end well. It's not ending well as we go on. So love to hear your comments. So let's go on. Let's take a look at the news today. In the news this past week, is California changing their policies and attracting people back to the state? No. We are now even Newsweek, which has really just been a panderer for the current administration. California's exodus may not be over. And they have a whole article talking about how more regulation is making housing less affordable, less houses for sale, more taxes are pushing out more and more jobs. And so even what would normally be the voice of the of the government is now having to admit how bad things are. A couple examples came up this week. One is Shake Shack. Now, I've never, to be full disclosure, I've never eaten a Shake Shack. I keep kosher. But boy, they look neat. People who go there seem to like it a lot. And here in California, we're shutting down our California locations because of the minimum wage. 5 stores just in LA because of the minimum wage hike. And so when I grew up, a minimum wage job was an entry level for a teenager. What you have now are politicians claiming that the minimum wage has to be a livable wage for a family. And so whether that's true or not, I mean, you can make that decision. Our politicians have. But the unintended consequence is teenagers can't get jobs with companies like this. If the wage is so high, 2 things are happening. 1, they're competing with adults who are more experienced. And 2, the companies are turning either to automation or just shutting down the business. And so you have less and less opportunities for people to get in the labor market and get started and get a good job and learn what they need to learn in order to get their career started. I started in retail. I worked at Paul's TV. For those who might remember, Paul, I am the king. He was the king of big screen TVs back when that was a thing in La Habra, California. And I got that job, and I'm sure it was below minimum wage. Now I got paid next to nothing, but it was a great experience to learn. I opened up boxes of big screen TVs coming in from Japan and Korea and learned a lot about industry and retail. Also, California, another factor driving homeowners out is insurance. Allstate, now I said before, State Farm has stopped writing new policies. Allstate is raising their policies by 34% as of November. So 350,000 homeowners across California are going to see their insurance rates go up by, on average, 34%. And obviously, some will say, wow, that's too expensive. I'm not going to stay here and sell. I can't afford it. Some will drop insurance and not have insurance, and that'll be a problem. Other home buyers, when they factor the payment, won't be able to get insurance, won't be able to buy the house. So just another factor. And part of why insurance is so high is in California, we have policies that force more risk and spread it over the whole state. For example, the state refuses to manage the forest properly, so we have more forest fires that affect more houses. And then those houses need insurance, and they're harder to get. And so this is a cycle that continues on top of everything else going on in the economy, inflation and expenses and such. It's also harder to build in California. It's hard, materials are more expensive, labor is more expensive, and that's what's driving up insurance costs as well. So again, just another factor that makes living here more expensive, and what's more expensive, people move out. One of the things, if you've noticed, like I have, one day I was driving down, in my case, Washington Boulevard, but here's a case on, actually this is it, this is the same spot. Now you look at the picture. This is Manchester Avenue, okay, not the same, but nearby. Where, there used to be 3 lanes, and as bad as traffic is in LA, like on Manchester Boulevard at rush hour was a nightmare. You used to have 3 lanes of traffic, now you have 2. So instead of building more traffic movement, instead of widening streets, making them more efficient, our government officials are purposely making them worse. In this case, making a bike lane. And what you'll notice, whenever you see a picture of a bike lane, it's always the evidence. You can count the cars. Just let's count the cars going towards the picture. You have 1, 2, 3, and then further back, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you have one bike. So this just documents that you have 2 lanes with about 8 cars driving 8 or more people, and you have this bike lane, one of the 3 lanes, for one guy. And not only that, it used to be that you could even park on these streets in some cases as well as drive by, and the businesses had parking. Now they don't have the ability to park. If a lot of people were biking, and I think this is the politician's fantasy, that we'll all be on bikes. And maybe that would be nice, but the truth is, certainly with the crime, Los Angeles is just not a bike city. It's just not really how most people want to live. There are some that are fanatical about it, but when you look at a bike lane, in my experience, other than days where there's big events, you don't see many people on the bikes. You see a lot of cars experiencing bad traffic as a result. So again, there you go, City of Los Angeles making our life more difficult. In the news, a good article in a way, but bad at the same time. Kiplinger, which is a personal finance source, had an article this week, Are Living Trusts Worth It? Pros and Cons. Now, I have a podcast called Probate Weekly. I regularly interview estate planning attorneys. I believe everybody who owns a house in California should have an estate plan, probably including a living trust. And anybody who has kids should have one as well, meaning minor children. Because if you're incapacitated, how do you want them taken care of? And avoid probate court and conservatorships and guardianships and such. So this article, it says pros and cons, and you read it, well, there's obvious pros. Not state or tax advantages, but more importantly are the ease when somebody passes or somebody's incapacitated of transferring property, transferring ownership and rules. The bad part is it says, is it worth it? Now, of course, there's a cost to anything. There's time and money. The expense of a living trust starts at about $1,500. It takes time to fill out the forms and such. But the only negative they show is for a particular type of trust, which is irrevocable. Now, an irrevocable trust is most commonly used from a tax point of view or to qualify for certain government programs. Not very common for the standard homeowner, not common in general by percentage. And so they use a negative of something that's a very limited example. And I just want to say to everybody who's watching this, if you own a home, at least talk to a professional about whether an estate plan, in particular a living trust, makes sense for you. If you have minor children and you're worried about what happens if you're incapacitated or they are, for sure, talk to a professional and see about getting a living trust. The cost of those have come down, the ease of them have gone up, and I just think that it's a minimal amount of preparation to be responsible with your resources and your family. Interesting story I saw the other day. Nobody here is surprised. But in Los Angeles, the city mayor wants to tell you that we have less homelessness than we did last year. Anybody who drives around knows that's ridiculous. But imagine this. They were able to remove camps on a famous drive for an event. Here we have in Hollywood Boulevard, famous Hollywood and Vine area, a great event called Cic La Via, CIC for bicycle, LA Via, and it was a bike event. And so in order to get the bike event and have the bike lane available, they had to remove this camp. And it's been here for a while, and it's terrible. And let me see if I can go back and get the picture of it there. Yeah, this is what life was like with homeless camps. You have fires and such. But along that boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, famous area, there's a bike lane. But more than that, they want to have a bike event. And so what the city was able to do was remove, imagine that, in order to have the event that the little city officials want to have, they're able to remove, all of a sudden, all the barriers to getting rid of homelessness goes away. So again, score one for the city. We're able to clear the bike lane and have an event without homelessness and the filth and the fires and crime that go along with that for at least that event. But I'm sure they just moved them all somewhere else and somebody else is suffering as a result. Lastly, in our big corporations, you just don't hate enough. One of the people that, if you follow my podcast, Real Estate Ripoffs, I covered in detail individually, was Jamie Dimon. He is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, the private banker to Jeffrey Epstein. They were sued and settled with 2 different groups for basically financing the international pedophilia ring and sex trafficking ring. Chase was the personal banker financing those activities. It's funny, When you go for a bank loan, they need to know every little detail, but they want to claim they didn't know what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, but they paid hundreds of millions of dollars of fines, and Jamie Dimon was the head of the company at the time. So he came out this week with in favor of the Buffett rule, which is taxing Americans, wealthy Americans, not him, wealthy Americans, and that would help reduce the nation's debt. And so this is a common trick for people trying to prove their social stature in America today, is let's tax those rich guys, right? They're the bad guys. It's like when Bernie Sanders used to always rail on millionaires. Well, now that he's a multimillionaire with 4 homes, doesn't everybody in Vermont have 4 homes, he famously said. He wants to tax billionaires now. Well, Jamie Dimon wants to have the Buffett rule. The Buffett rule was famously Warren Buffett, one of the very wealthy guys who's done nothing but enrich himself and his companies, but has really never put the money to any practical good. Famously said that he paid a higher tax rate than his secretary, which is true. We pay more in wages and profits on money than we do on the dividends and interest on the money we already earn and pay taxes on. And so Warren Buffett, rather than explain, here's a wealthy man who should be an educator and help explain to Americans how money works. Instead, he rather pandered to politicians to get more political power and favors. That's how he's built his company, is getting regulatory advantages that other people don't, railroads, utilities, and such. And so he would pander to them and say, yeah, I should pay as high a rate as my secretary does, not telling the truth in that his money he already earned and was just the profits of the money he had already earned paid taxes on once before. Also, there's nothing stopping him from writing a check. When you file your taxes every year, they ask you, do you want to contribute more money? And nobody that I know says yes. So Jamie Dimon here wants to join those rich people who attack other rich people. You'll notice, if you saw my podcast episode, I show the change of his dress. He started off with the statesman look, because I think he was planning to run for president at one point. He had always was in a suit and tie, very polished banker look, Wall Street look. And then it was the no tie look, and now he's got the open shirt and tan, and he's just hip and cool. Jamie helping the little guy. So he's saying we should be taxing the rich. Now his income at Chase is salaried income, so that tax is taxed at the same rate as Warren Buffett's secretary, but higher because he makes more. But here's a guy who's worth $2.5 billion. There's certainly nothing preventing him from donating $1.5 billion to reduce the deficit if he's concerned about it, and challenging his colleagues to do the same thing. They'll never do that because he doesn't really care about reducing the debt. This is a guy who supported administrations who spent money like drunken sailors. This is a guy who has supported global corporations who've helped hollow out American industry. He doesn't care about American debt. He doesn't really even operate as an American. He's a globalist. He's the kind of guy who goes to Davos and hangs out with Europeans. So again, take a look at these articles and know this is just campaign literature to make you feel good about Jamie Dimon and your local Chase branch, and forget about the fact that literally they were the private bankers to Jeffrey Epstein. You just can't really hate these people enough. So at the end of the day, what should you do? Well, I wouldn't let the news and these people bother me. My job is to create value for my customers, make a profit, and invest that into assets, real estate and related. How about you? You looking to buy a house? You looking to sell a house? Looking to add to real estate investments? If I can help in any way, reach out. I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media. You probably know my name and number, or reply to this email or on the description down below. If I can help in any way, please reach out. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks.